morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you this morning, so thank you very much for your welcome. I just want to share a little bit about the work of the Kerusso Trust and to share a video with you as well that shows something of what's been going on over this last year. So I'm sure that many of you will know, and it's already been introduced, we're Jonathan and Ruth, and we work with the Kerusso Trust, and we work in Malawi with a Malawian organisation called J-Life Ministries. And this map shows you where Malawi is. It's in the southern part of Africa. It's a relatively small country, beautiful, enormous poverty. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, and yet people who are very warm-hearted and open to the gospel and to responding to the good news. So we work with a Malawian team. When Jonathan, in fact, when we all went out for a first time 15 years ago, we were out there and we met folk, and a couple of years later, Jonathan met someone called Connex, who's on the far right-hand side of that picture. And so at the beginning, when the Kerusso Trust started, it was really just us working with Connex and beginning the work of training church leaders. But now there's a team of about 10 people, many of whom we support through the Kerusso Trust, involved in different aspects of the work. And it is a real joy and privilege to work with them. We learn so much about the Lord and serving him through them. So I'm just going to give you a very brief summary of some of the work which you will have heard about before. When the Kerusso Trust started, it was really focusing on training church leaders. Malawi is a country of great poverty. Many who have become church leaders, especially out in the rural areas, don't have opportunity to go to Bible college. In fact, as many as 90% have not had any training at all for the ministry that God has called them to. And so this program of Learn to Serve for church leaders gives them 4 weeks of training that is helping them to understand the Bible and then to teach it and preach it to their congregations. And it's also helping them to know how to be pastors, how to help people in their congregations who are suffering from huge poverty and many challenges and difficulties. So it's a toolkit for ministry that helps them to teach and to be pastors in their context. Both men and women attend the training. There's usually about a third who are women who are perhaps children's workers or women's ministry leaders. So it's open to all who will come and sit under God's word. A second group that we work with is chiefs. I would love to tell you more about this, and this is a little appetite wetter for another time. We'll tell you more about the work with chiefs, but these are the other significant group of leaders within the community who have a really big influence as community leaders, and in recent years, the door has opened to work with them and to give them training about leadership that's relevant for them in their roles, but base it on Bible stories. And the response is amazing, and the real change in their lives and in the way they lead is wonderful. This was a large group that met last year. I think about 150 turned up for this particular training, eager to come and to be trained as to how to be better leaders within their community. So these are some of the main areas of work: training church leaders, training community leaders. There's also radio broadcasting that goes out each week. There's also work with young people and children. But what I want to do now is just to move on to a particular project in an area called Imbwa. It's about 25 kilometres from Camp Bethel, where our partners are based. And it shows you some aspects of work that have been going on in this local area that is helping development within the community, but also giving opportunities to share the gospel. And this area is remote, it's hilly, it's poor. It's typical of the area from which the church pastors come who attend training. So it will just give you a little insight into where these pastors are ministering. When Jonathan first went there maybe 10 years ago, this area had no primary school, no clean water, they just collected water from the river, no health clinic.
Imbwa is a village that's about 20 or 25 kilometres in that direction out from where we are here at Camp Bethel. And it's a very remote area. It has no electricity, and when I first visited a few years ago, it had no water, no opportunity of school or health care within 7-10 kilometres of the village.
We decided to go there and open this farm to bring transformation to the people around that area. The people of that area totally depend on charcoal selling. They cut trees and burn charcoal. So through that farm, we want them to change their focus from selling charcoal so that they should be able to grow their crops using modern methods which they will be learning from our farm.
As the Kerusso Trust, we had put in a borehole at Imbwa to provide irrigation for the farm, but also clean drinking water for this remote rural community.
The area has been registering high cases of cholera, but since we introduced this safe water through the irrigation system that we used, people are now safe. They are no longer having cholera. We also want to sustain our J-Life ministry through the resources that we will be realizing from the farm.
In building relationships with this community, they get opportunities for evangelism and discipleship and building up the church. So it's very much a holistic project, both meeting their basic human needs and meeting spiritual needs and improving their knowledge of the Lord and walking with Him.
But above all of the community members, including the chiefs in the community, as well as some of the church leaders, they are also participating in Learn to Self programs, which is a Christian leadership training program.
But we were still aware that when the sun goes down, it's completely dark there. There's no electricity supply available, no lighting, no easy mobile phone charging, and that really holds back development. So that is where the Light for Life project, as a three-way partnership between the Kerusso Trust, J-Life Ministries and Creative Energy, was born. And now we're implementing that project after a period of development and shipping.
Through the torches that will be distributed to some of the families, learners or students from those families will be able to use those torches for their studies.
That will create also the opportunity for the community members to charge their radios so that they be listening to some of the Christian leadership training series that we are giving out on the radio. We are providing the life into the community, so to say, by giving energy to them.
So now looking to develop other ways of helping the Imbwa community, such as providing a school with some classrooms in that area. That's another area the Kerusso Trust has been working on to meet that basic need for education, because without education then it's very hard for the community to move forward and be developed. Opening the primary school is a great start, but it is only the beginning of what's needed. Partnership is indeed the way forward for taking communities like this out of poverty. We have a partnership between the Kerusso Trust and J-Life. We have a partnership between J-Life and the Imbwa community. Buildings like this have been built through a partnership between the Kerusso Trust and some of its supporters. And then also involvement of other organisations like Creative Energy now, and our Light for Life project means we've been able to bring solar rechargeable batteries into this community, so that light, phone recharging, and yes, even showing films and having radio clubs has become possible. So there are great future possibilities available here at Imbwa, and it would be great if people would continue partnering with us as we build this web of relationships to bring transformation to this lovely community.
Of the areas that the pastors and the church and the community leaders come from, that we're working with. And in this project, there's really just finding ways to meet people at their point of need, to engage with them, to provide some help and meet basic needs, has opened the doors for sharing the gospel. And I think it's also, so often we read in the New Testament of Jesus healing the sick, of being moved by compassion, and wanting to not just teach, but to meet people where they were at and minister to them. This is an opportunity where we've been able to both share the gospel as well as help meet some very basic needs in that community. And the video talks a lot about partnership, and thank you so much for your partnership and the gifts that have come from this church. This work wouldn't be happening without churches like yourselves being part of that journey and supporting us, so thank you. And please do continue to journey with us. There are different ways you can do that. We have a sign-up sheet at the back if you would like to receive monthly news from us. There's a prayer diary, which would be great if you would like to use and to pray for the work, which is so important. And of course, we welcome all donations, and 100% of all that's given goes to support the work in Malawi.
Everyone needs compassion, love that's never failing. Let mercy fall on me. Everyone needs forgiveness, the kindness of the Savior, the hope of nations. My God is mighty to save, He is mighty to save, forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave, Jesus conquered the grave. So take me as you find me, all my fears and failures, fill my give my life to follow everything I believe in. Now I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Salvation, He rose and conquered the grave, Jesus conquered the grave. Shine a light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine a light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Savior, he can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shed a light and let the whole world see. Singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. If you could both come up just now, in actual fact. So if you'd like to join me up here. In just a moment, Ruth is going to read for us, and then Jonathan will deliver God's word for the day. But before you do, let me pray for you both. Father, thank you for the work that the Kerusso Trust does in partnership with other people to bring aid, guidance and protection to those who are not able to do so for themselves in Africa. Father, we ask that this morning that the word from yourself will go through Jonathan to us, and that we will have open ears and hearts to hear what you have to say. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I'm going to be reading from Numbers chapter 10 and verses 11 through till 36. And I'm reading from the NIV. And it's headed, "The Israelites leave Sinai." On the 20th day of the second month of the second year, the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle of the covenant law. Then the Israelites set out from the desert of Sinai and travelled from place to place until the cloud came to rest in the desert of Paran. Okay. You take it off. Okay. Okay. So the Israelites, they set out this first time at the Lord's command through Moses. The divisions of the camp of Judah went first, under their standard. Nashon, son of Amminadab, was in command. Nathaniel, son of Zuar, was over the division of the tribe of Issachar, and Eliab, son of Helon, was over the division of the tribe of Zebulun. Then the tabernacle was taken down, and the Gershonites and the Merarites who carried it set out. The divisions of the camp of Reuben went next, under their standard. Eliza, son of Shedeur, was in command. Shelumiel, son of Jerushadai, was over the division of the tribe of Simeon, and Eliasaph, son of Juel, was over the division of the tribe of Gad. Then the Kohathites set out, carrying the holy things. The tabernacle was to be set up before they arrived. The divisions of the camp of Ephraim went next, under their standard. Elishama, son of Ammiud, was in command. Gamaliel, son of Pedazah, was over the division of the tribe of Manasseh, and Abidan, son of Gideoni, was over the division of the tribe of Benjamin. Finally, as the rear guard for all the units, the divisions of the camp of Dan set out under their standard. Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai, was in command. Pagiel, son of Ochran, was over the division of the tribe of Asher, and Ahira, son of Enan, was over the division of the tribe of Naphtali. This was the order of march for the Israelite divisions as they set out. Now, Moses said to Hobab, son of Ruel the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, "We are setting out for the place about which the Lord said, 'I will give it to you.' Come with us, and we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised good things to Israel." He answered, "No, I will not go. I am going back to my own land and to my own people." But Moses said, "Please do not leave us. You know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can be our eyes. If you come with us, we will share with you whatever good things the Lord gives us." So they set out from the mountain of the Lord and travelled for 3 days. The ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them during those 3 days to find them a place to rest. The cloud of the Lord was over them by day when they set out from the camp. Whenever the ark set out, Moses said, "Rise up, Lord. May your enemies be scattered. May your foes flee before you." Whenever it came to rest, he said, "Return, Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel."
It's only your wife that you can give passages like that to read. We'll still be friends at the end. The God who guides and protects. I don't know how many of you have done big house moves. I guess some of you may even have done international house moves. I can certainly remember when we moved from England up to Scotland 25 years ago, from Bristol up to, it was Glasgow first of all at that stage. We'd been married for 4 years. We had a 1-year-old Rachel and Timothy was on the way. I was leaving the security of work to become a student once again, actually at the university in Glasgow. We'd sold our house in Bristol, but we hadn't yet found a house up here. So Ruth and the children packed up and went off to her parents in Oxfordshire, and I headed off on my own up to Glasgow because I'd got to be there for the start of things. And I have that clear memory of heading north up the M5 and M6 and M74 up to Glasgow in the small car with certain things with me, like laptops and things that I didn't want to be putting into storage. And I also remember the back of the car, looking in the rearview mirror. It was full of Ruth's pot plants that I was taking with me. So clear memory from 25 years ago. We planned for the day, but when the day finally came to make the big move, we were filled with that mix of excitement and anxiety. I'm sure many of you who've done big moves when you've had families and so on can relate to that sort of emotion. And surely those would have been very similar emotions that God's people Israel would have had at the time of this passage that we're looking at today here in the book of Numbers. Not sure how familiar you are with some of the story that the book of Numbers fits into. So what we have at this point is God has been getting his people ready out in the Sinai wilderness, ready to march in and take possession of the promised land, the land that he had promised to give. Now, I don't know how well you can see this map, but this map is just showing a little bit of, they started here in Egypt. They had the Exodus, that in Exodus chapter 12. And then they started the march out. They crossed the Reed Sea, or often called the Red Sea, about here. It's in that area of lakes that the Suez Canal now goes through. And then they started a march down. They went to a place called Marah, where there was bitter water, and that caused them problems because there wasn't clean drinking water. And to Elim, a place of palms and springs, and a very pleasant place for a while. Moses then met Jethro, his father-in-law, who was a Midianite. Now, Midian, for your information, is over here. So he was a wandering shepherd-type person, come originally from here, and he met him somewhere here. And then they ended up at Mount Sinai. And they'd been at Mount Sinai all the time through from Exodus chapter 19 until where we are here in the middle of the book of Numbers. It was 57 weeks since they had left Egypt in that great act of salvation that God did in getting them out from slavery in Egypt and the walk to the promised land. They'd left Egypt carrying the bones of Jacob with them, the patriarch. So their intention was they were leaving permanently, and it was just a few weeks' walk, and they would be in this promised land of Canaan that God had offered to them. So they'd been at this place of Sinai now, down at the bottom of the peninsula is probably where it is. They'd been there for the last 10 months. And during that time, they'd been preparing for this big move into the promised land. And during that 10 months, God had given them so much. He'd given them the 10 Commandments and the rest of the law in Exodus chapter 20 to 23, all of the book of Leviticus, and in Numbers chapters 5 and 6. He'd reconfirmed his covenant that he made originally with Abraham, and that he'd reconfirmed with Isaac and with Jacob, and now he'd made again with their great leader, Moses, promising God's presence with them, his guidance, his blessing, and asking for their loyalty, their obedience, their worship. It's a covenant he still has with us under the new covenant of Christ. And he'd given them instructions on how to make the tabernacle and how to build all its contents. And in the latter chapters of Exodus, they made it exactly according to the pattern that he'd given them. Then he set apart the priests and the Levites, the people of the tribe of Levi, the one tribe that didn't have any land of their own. And they were to manage the tabernacle. All these instructions had come out. God had then set up a sacrificial system of worship so that they, his sinful people, could be back in his presence. They could live with him. They could travel with him. They could journey through life with him. A sacrificial system which is done away with now, but we have the promise of God's presence through the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. So he'd done all of those things while they were in the wilderness. He'd then set up a camp, and he'd given instructions how they should camp. Now, at the center of the camp was the tabernacle, which contained the ark with the covenant, the 10 Commandments on the stones, and symbolically that was God's presence. The Levite tribes, the Merarites, the Kohathites, the Gershonites, they camped next to the tent. They were the ones who managed it, who looked after it, who ministered at it, ran the worship at it. And then 4 groups of 3 tribes camped on the north, south, east and west around the outside of the camp. A very structured, very defined way that they should camp each time. In the center of it was the tabernacle with the ark. The 10 Commandments in there were a very verbal expression of the covenant between God and his people. The mercy seat in the middle of the tabernacle, providing the place of mediation between God and his people where they could come together. And Then they instructed them to conduct a census of the men of fighting age, the beginning of Numbers. And so God had turned this marching rabble who'd left Egypt, slaves in Egypt, he'd turned this marching rabble into a well-organized and structured camp. He'd appointed hierarchies of leaders over each of the tribes, tribe by tribe, division by division. And then they celebrated the Passover, exactly 1 year since that original Passover when the firstborn was struck down and they finally got to leave the grips of Pharaoh and slavery and begin that journey to freedom. So that's what had happened over that 10 months. On top of that, God had given them a public address system. We read that just in the few verses before where Ruth began in chapter 10. 2 silver trumpets. Now, they would have looked something like this. These trumpets came out of the tomb of Tutankhamun, who was Pharaoh in Egypt. Not the same time exactly, but very similar era. The wooden thing in the middle is like a mute that goes inside it, and by moving that around, they can make different tones and sounds from these silver trumpets. So they could use them to give signs that everyone was to get ready to break camp and be off. They could say that an enemy was approaching and get ready to fight. They could announce that it's time for worship and sacrifice. The silver trumpets were a continual reminder of God's presence, his authority, his help with them as they travelled. Nowadays we use air raid sirens, school bells, church bells to announce time for worship. It's a similar kind of function for what these silver trumpets performed. So God had given them everything they needed to organise this rabble into a well-organised travelling party. So let's come to our passage. First thing we see at the beginning of verse 11 to 13 is they were getting ready now finally to make this big move off into the promised land. They'd been obedient in doing all these things that God had said they should do while at Sinai. All these instructions, everything was ready, just like on our big move when we moved up to Scotland from England. 11 months and 19 days camped at the foot of Mount Sinai. Finally, it was sort of April or May time, the second month it says in the text. The trumpet sounded and they were off. There'd be that buzz of excitement amongst the camp. It's taken 59 chapters of the Bible before this to get everything set out, prepared, laid out, ready. Everyone knew their assigned role. There weren't going to be squabbles between people about who should be doing what, who should be in the front and who should be at the back. No arguments about that. The people at the front were ready to meet whatever challenges they found as they travelled through the wilderness. The people at the back ready to repel any bandits that might come along and try and sneak up behind and steal things. If they obeyed God through his servant Moses, the promise was there. Their future would be glorious. It was only going to be a few weeks' time till they arrived in the land. Then we have those verses describing all the different divisions and who the leaders were and so on that Ruth laboured her way through. The procession. They moved out in harmonious accord. Now, this is what the procession looked like. At the front, you had the Ark of the Covenant, God's presence. And then 3 tribes to encounter whatever they met at the front. Then you had the Levite tribes who were carrying the tabernacle itself. They could go on first, and then when they arrived at the place they were going to camp, they could put the tabernacle up. 3 more tribes, and then the tribe who were carrying all the articles that went inside the tabernacle. So by the time they arrived, the tents would be up, they'd have pitched camp, and all the furniture and so on could just be slotted straight in to the tabernacle. Then 3 more tribes, and then 3 more tribes again, bringing up the rear. A well-organized procession. Now you notice it says that all Israel was organized by its division, and each division had the lifting of a standard. You know, a bit like when they have the Olympic Games, they have the opening procession of all the countries, and each country is holding up a standard saying, you know, we are Great Britain or we are France or whatever. There'd be a standard, something like that each of the tribes had as they went. It reminds you that the people are actually heading on a war footing into the promised land. They have, you know, commanders, divisions, standards. You see, the land that they're promised by God to enter, it's not an empty land. There'll be people who are already there, who they will be defeating as they go in. Now, we may not like this sort of war imagery very much nowadays, but as the Church of Jesus, we must remember that we are engaged in a spiritual battle. Paul instructs every Christian that we are soldiers in a spiritual battle. He says in Ephesians, put on the full armor of God so you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you'll be able to stand your ground. We must be dressed ready for a spiritual battle. We're very aware of that when we go to Malawi. Sometimes in this country we can suppress those kind of ways of thinking. And yet, Satan is active in this world. He's doing everything he can to break down God's people, to turn them away, to make them drift. So we put on that breastplate of righteousness and helmet of salvation and feet fitted with the sandals of the readiness to spread the gospel of peace, and of course the sword of the Spirit, the word of God, the only offensive bit of our armour. So we must never forget this is a spiritual battle, and they are going in to fulfill God's will in the land, just as we are there building God's kingdom across the whole world, a spiritual kingdom. Now we're going to look at the next verses. Oh, it didn't change. Let's try again. There we are. This invitation of Hobab, and we're going to dwell a little bit longer in there. Verses 29 to 32, and focus on this. Moses had the guiding cloud, the pillar of fire and the guiding cloud. Moses was hearing the voice of God, but Moses knew that he needed also human companions, people like Hobab to help him as he led this enormous group of people through the wilderness. Moses was a spiritual giant of a leader, but he was humble enough to know he needed support. In fact, Jethro, his father-in-law, Hobab's father, he would have been the one who was telling Moses, you need to learn to delegate or you're going to go under. Very good practical advice from these wandering shepherd people. Well, Hobab, you see, had grown up in the desert. The desert was his home. He knew the whole environment. He knew the weather patterns. He had practical survival skills. He was the sort of Bear Grylls of his day. So he was a great guy to have traveling with them. And then the cloud stops moving when the Israelites prepare to camp. Hobab will be the one that could say, that's a really good place to put the tents. You're protected from dust storms and so on. So very practical advice. And God's people today, we also need wisdom, skills, and feedback from one another to keep us on the right pathway. Our hearts may be fixed on him and doing his will. We may be totally devoted to the Lord, but we still need the input and expertise of other people, the feedback of others on our lives. We need to be humble enough to take their comments, seeking their feedback. Ruth and I are very aware of that as we lead the Kerusso Trust. We have trustees, which of course includes Pastor Andy, and we're delighted to have him on our board. We have trustees, we have other volunteers who help us. They equip us better to do the things that God's called us for. They help us not to do the wrong things, and they help us to do the right things better by their wise advice, and so on. So it's the same for all of us today. Each of us can be a gift to someone else in their ministry and their life, helping, advising. Hobab was the brother-in-law of Moses, so he had connections to him. And it said that Hobab was a Kenite. So that's a sub-tribe of those Moabites that we looked at. So he wasn't part of God's special people. But Moses wanted to bring Hobab in on the journey with him. Of course, when the cloud started to move, Hobab decided, first of all, no, he didn't want to go with them. Maybe he was about to enter territory he wasn't so familiar with. Maybe he was losing his nerve after being with them for a while and seeing the size of the people that were moving. But Moses was determined that Hobab would come with them. Hobab didn't belong, and he couldn't belong to God's people unless he took a step of coming into God's people and becoming part of God's people. And that's the same for so many people today. We have to take that step to become part of God's people. So what three things can we draw about Moses from these 4 verses in the middle of our passage? First of all, Moses believed the promises of God. It says, Moses said to Hobab, the Midianite, Moses, the son of his father-in-law, we are setting out for the place about which the Lord said, I will give it to you. God had promised it, and Moses believed the promises of God. Moses was confident God would deliver what he had promised. Moses knew where he was going. You could say, therefore, Moses was a pilgrim on a journey to a destination that he knows. In contrast, Hobab was a nomad. He had no future horizons beyond the wilderness in which he was familiar and had grown up. And that's what so many people in our society today are. They are spiritually nomads. They are people who are wandering about in this world. They have birth, they get education, they get employment, maybe marriage and family. Then there's retirement. And then what? Nothing. They're born in the wilderness. They live in the wilderness. And they die in the wilderness. Jesus said in Mark chapter 8, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his soul? The whole world is born into this nomadic life. And it doesn't matter how much you own or how much you earn. Anyone without a future in Jesus Christ is a nomad in this world. And they just go round and round with no ultimate future. Their horizon is limited by the wilderness in which they live. I wonder, what will people say at your funeral? Will people talk about your career, your hobbies, your family? That it? Or will they talk about what you did to help build God's kingdom, what you did to build up other people? You see, in contrast, Moses was a pilgrim. He was on a journey with a clear destination, a clear purpose. He knew all that he had now was not everything that there was going to be. He knew he was heading for the promised land. Hobab didn't know that, and initially at least didn't want that. Likewise, Christians have a purpose. We have a destination. We have a sure and certain hope of glory in in heaven with eternal life. Interestingly, the writer to the Hebrews, when referring to these Old Testament people, he then said that God had something planned that was even better than the promised land for Moses. So as Christians, we should have confidence in our hearts and lips. We should be assertive about our future because we know where we are going. Paul wrote to Timothy, and he was in the squalor of a prison cell when he said, "For I am not ashamed, for I know whom I've believed, and I'm convinced he is able to guard until that day what has been entrusted to me." Faith is being sure of what is hoped for, certain of what we cannot yet see. But remember, in the end, Moses never entered the promised land. He only saw it from afar, from the top of Mount Nebo, east of the Jordan. But he climbed Mount Nebo, and he entered something even better than the earthly promised land. He died, and he was buried somewhere there. And there's the new generation that finally went into the promised land. Moses believed the promises of God. Moses enjoyed the promises of God. He said to Hobab, "Come with me, and we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised good things to Israel." Do you think when Moses said those words, he said them with a sad face or with a happy face? Do you think he said, "Come with us and we'll treat you well and you'll have really good things you can enjoy"? No, of course he didn't. He said it with a really happy face. He was radiant with expectation, with certainty that the promises that he'd believed would also be the promises he would enjoy. As Christians, we should enjoy those promises of the future that we have. We should be enjoying them now in this life. Because only a tiny fraction of our lives are actually going to be lived on earth. The majority is all living in a better place. And Paul wrote about that in 2 Corinthians. He said, "For this light momentary affliction," that's this life, "is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison." We should have that enjoyment of that expectation of what we have to come. Like Moses, we should enjoy that pilgrim experience of knowing God now. And then we should offer to share that experience with the nomads, the Hobabs of this world. So we bring them in for them to enjoy that experience as well. And then that's what Moses did. He believed, he enjoyed, but then he offered the promises of God. Hobab said no, but Moses said, "Don't leave us, come with us. And if you come with us, we will share whatever good things the Lord gives to us." He must have communicated that enthusiasm to Hobab. He was a passionate evangelist, you could say. First, Hobab wanted nothing to do with it. No, thank you. Not interested. How often do we hear that from the nomads of this world? But after initially declining, Moses kept on, and he convinced him to change his mind. And if you read in Judges, 200 years later, it says the descendants of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up with the people of Judah to the city of the palms in the wilderness of Judah and settled with the people. The descendants of Hobab are there in amongst God's people enjoying the promised land. His outreach to him worked, and the whole succession of descendants thereafter had a different experience. They enjoyed the Lord. So, we must remember how we live affects the eternal destiny of other people. So as God's people, we must live in the world before others in a way that shows the highest of moral standards, the best of motives, the purest of moralities, the most genuine friendship, the warmest love. That's how we show that our understanding of these promises of God that we're enjoying are real and are there to invite others into as well. Otherwise, Why will people not just stick with the nomadic life, the familiar? They do all right in it. We should be the most attractive of people to come amongst because we have that relationship and presence of God. The Bible says we are the bride of Christ. Did you ever see an unattractive bride? We should be attractive to the world outside. Moses was offering Hobab that same opportunity of salvation. And then the last little bit of the passage, the cloud and the ark. God's people finally leave. They're on the journey. They go from the mountain of the Lord. It's a reminder that actually everywhere in the world is already the Lord's. The mountain is his, the deserts are his, as well as the promised land is his. Whatever we're going through in life, we're in his land. We're walking the steps through his journey. He is there with us. The pillar of cloud goes before them, a miracle of nature, guides them, and provides shade from the burning sun. God's provision again. The words ark and covenant are used together for the first time in the Bible, where it says the ark of the covenant went ahead of them, reminding of God's promised relationship with them. So what should we learn from this? Two things as we finish we'll learn. Number one, do not fear. You see, humanly speaking, these Israelites traveling through the desert had everything to fear from making this big move, this journey on. They were moving into a land that they had never visited. They were going into a land that contained an enemy they had never seen. It was all full of unknowns. And we know uncertainty can be very hard to live with in our lives. But the one thing they could be very sure of was that whatever they faced, the Lord was going with them. He would march ahead of them by means of his ark at the head of the procession. He would overshadow them with the protective cloud. God was in their midst, and just as he's in our midst here today. And he will be faithful to protect us, to guide us, to bless us. Our God is mighty to save, as we were singing earlier. And Moses prayed each day for God's promise to be fulfilled, each morning for the Lord to defeat his enemies and their enemies, protect them. Each evening, the Lord would come back in and dwell with them in the camp. Do not fear, said Jesus, as he walked out on the water to the terrified disciples in the middle of a storm. You know, whatever life may bring, God will deliver his promises. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is my strength of my heart and my portion forever, said the psalmist. Whatever the future holds, with him, do not fear. And secondly, the Lord is leading us to a place of rest. It said in verse 33, the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them for 3 days' journey to seek out a resting place for them. They needed to rest peacefully as they traveled. Even though they were traveling through the wilderness, God still wanted to find them places in that difficult time where they could rest, relax, and be confident of him with them. And you know, God has provided Jesus to us to give us soul-satisfying rest. So if you're struggling with anxiety, with fear, with sickness, with uncertainty, claim Christ's promise of peace and rest. Finish with this famous verse. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And God keeps his promises. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. And you'll find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And this soul-satisfying rest isn't just for those of us who are already pilgrims, but it's for those nomads out there that we need to welcome in and say, come, become a pilgrim, experience freedom from fear and soul-satisfying rest. And if you come with and join us on this journey, yes, even today, you will find that same soul-satisfying rest in Jesus Christ that so many of us have come to know already. Let's pray. Father, thank you for all we can learn from these stories from your ancient people. You were building a people for your own possession who would enjoy your presence and would worship you then, and you're doing that today, except now it's not just the narrow people of Israel, it's a message for the whole world. And your kingdom covers everywhere. You're building a spiritual kingdom. May we be part of that journey. May we welcome in those nomads who are lost in the wilderness, in need of becoming pilgrims with a destination and a journey that is not just this life, but so much greater in the life to come. And may we share that with joy, sharing the promises that we have from you with others, the promises of freedom from fear and of soul-satisfying rest. Now, thank you for that, Lord, and we pray you'll be with us as we go out in this week to serve you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. The Lord has promised good to me, His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow, the sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood, His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. My chains are gone, unending love, amazing grace, unending love, amazing grace, unending